I'm going to cross live to Keir Starmer, who's talking in fervently impressive terms about apprenticeships. Go, Keir!
I'm a manufacturing graduate.
Yeah.
And my question is, a lot of people still see apprenticeships as something solely for trades. How does the government plan on changing that perspective?
Not solely for trades. I mean, I think, Pat, I'm right in saying there's 700 different subjects or areas in which you can do an apprenticeship, so a very, very wide range of skills.
No.
I think what we're very keen to do is to highlight those skilled ones which are almost the most important for our economy and put special emphasis in there. So I think we can do that, which will help. I think tilting and talking about apprenticeships makes a big difference as well. We have to keep talking about apprenticeships.
Shirt doesn't go with the jacket,
and
pal.
talking and showing. I think if people see what you do
right hand
here,
now. He's using his right hand a lot.
they would realise. You don't have to spend long on the production line to realise this is highly skilled, highly
we're doing a circle now.
Very difficult work. Every bit as difficult as going to university or sitting and doing a law degree or something like that, which is what I did. But wherever you go, it's the same. I was up in the Clyde where they're building frigates. And some of the electrical
next
skills
to Healy looks like she's
there were quite incredible, as it will be.
Asleep.
I mean, any one of these cars that you are...
One of these cars, those cars there, they look crap.
That element of it, and make sure it's
hands clasped together. Now we're doing a strange sound with
limited in any way.
A double.
Thank you very much. Anybody else got a question?
No.
Yeah, sir.
Hi.
No? Nobody wants to speak.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm a paint technician apprentice, and my question to you is, why should a young person choose to do an apprenticeship rather than go to university?
So many reasons.
God. Just one.
Skill learning from the get-go.
Yeah.
A route into a job, because the chances of going for an apprenticeship into a job are much higher than going to university and coming into a job. And of course, going to university these days carries quite a big loan normally with it, so people are coming out of university carrying quite a bit of debt starting their working lives, whereas if you work through an apprenticeship, obviously, you're earning as you're learning. I would say
Herbie,
every bit as...
we're going to talk... Herbie's on the line. Herbie, we're going to talk to you in a minute about the Marine. Does your Prime Minister inspire you? What's he doing with his hands? I'm slightly worried.
Start skilled working, learning.
What?
Sorry.
Brilliant. Stay there, Herbie. Don't worry. Herbie's not
it's a grown-up, serious...
Herbie's not the fastest. That was Ernie, wasn't it?
You've got to be part of the team.
Seriously, can you get rid of this android? He bores the bits off me. If I wanted to do an apprenticeship, I just decided I'm not going to. By the way, I will shout out apprenticeships are a very good thing, not just for young kids, for people returning to work. I've done loads of work with the Sun on these over the years. Apprenticeships for mums returning to work, people who've been made redundant, older people coming back in, they are fantastic. Not that it was his idea, he doesn't even know what a bloody apprenticeship is. Right, I'm going to give you a second chance, Herbie, to... He's gone. Herbie's done one. Right, Brian, good morning.
Morning, JK. From Southend. Got to think about this Marine. You know, surely, like, when they get arrested for these crimes, or these stupid crimes, you know, writing something on Facebook or social media, the police go and they arrest them. Then they look at the charges. Then they go through and they ring the CPS up to say, shall we take it to court? And then some snotty little kid, whatever they are, with purple hair, nose pierced, earrings through her mouth and her tongue, whatever, or whatever they want to call them, say, yeah, let's prosecute. And they go to court. You know, who on earth are these people who give the go-ahead to prosecute? Surely they should see it and say, this is nonsense. No, we can't prosecute. There's not enough evidence. There's no sign of a conviction, no realistic view of a conviction. Just throw it out. But no, they go, yeah, let's go ahead, prosecute. All the money that's cost. That poor bloke don't get any money back, does he? I bet he weren't on legal aid, and he's had to pay his defence. But I bet he don't get the costs or the cost returned for the lawyers and all that. That's an absolute shambles and a disgrace.
You see what Brian did there? He got so angry, he started to choke, and basically he had to finish. I hope you're all right, Brian. Let's say... Right, Herbie, you're back on in Harrow. How are you, Herbs?
Very well, thank you, Jeremy.
We were listening to Starmer droning on, and I thought cleverly I'd bring you in and you'd comment, and you put the phone down and maybe look like an idiot, man.
No, the phone cut off for me, Jeremy. It's the system, I'm afraid. Yeah, I mean, say, Keir Starmer, I do admit, I took an apprenticeship out, and it was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah, they're good.
Because I've got a trade. I can always go out and learn, go evening classes and things like that, but you can't with a trade. Once you've got your trade, you've got it for life. It's as simple as that, but it's the best thing you could ever do.
I couldn't agree more. Very quickly, you're replying to this story about Jamie Michael, the ex-Royal Marine, branded a danger to kids because he dared to put on Facebook a couple of things and said some illegal migrants have committed crimes. Now not allowed to coach his daughter's football team. Quick comment from you.
No, it's disgraceful. It's crazy. I mean, for God's sake, what's going on? This country's gone completely mad. I'll tell you what, Jeremy, we've got to do something soon. I've got to make you Prime Minister about that. That'd be even better.
How old are you, Herbie?
I'm 76.
76. What are you doing today?
Today, I've got to go and help somebody do something, and then hopefully I'm trying to clear up, I'm trying to move, Jeremy, and I'm trying to get things going. I'm also, you know, I want to apply to become a candidate as well, so, you know, I don't mind. I'm still working. I'm still busy.
Got to in this country. Got to work. I'll be working till I'm about 100. Just want to take you back to a story a couple of weeks ago. Do you remember the story about the Tel Aviv football fans being banned from Birmingham for the game against Aston Villa in the Europa League? A group of local leaders, people, got together and decided that it would be best if this team, who in their mind were responsible for much violence, didn't travel. Lots of people jumping up and down saying this is anti-Semitic. It was because of the large Muslim population in Birmingham, and it was playing to a certain degree, certain demographic. Now, a West Midlands police chief, they've apologised to the Jewish community this morning over that Tel Aviv fan ban. Let's say good morning again to Jake Wallace-Simmons, author and columnist. Jake, good morning.
Good morning.
Finally, tell us more. They've apologised. Explain more in detail for me if you can.
Well, this is evidence that the police have been giving under scrutiny to a select committee in Parliament at this outrage of this ban, anti-Semitic ban against Jewish and Israeli football fans coming to Birmingham. And the latest ridiculous move on behalf of the police was that they suggested, now get this, that Jews apparently had been consulted by the police and had agreed, yeah, it's probably best that you don't invite us because we probably cause trouble. This obviously came out as being totally untrue, and the police were forced to apologise to the Jewish community for making that pretty offensive and outrageous suggestion. But it's just the latest way in which the police's case is beginning to unravel. For example, another interesting part was where the police report was exposed as having used artificial intelligence to give them a false account of a game that the Israeli team had allegedly played against West Ham a couple of years ago. That game had never taken place, but the police cited it in their report. Now, the question this raises is, why didn't the police go to West Ham and say, look, guys, did you get any trouble from these Israeli fans? Go to the Metropolitan Police and say, did you get any trouble from these Israeli fans? Because if they had done, A, they'd have discovered that this match had never taken place, and B, they'd have also discovered, with a bit of further research, that over the last 100 games that this Israeli team had played in Europe, trouble had not been caused once. Not once.
But of course, the problem with all of this is that you then get left with the overriding feeling that anti-Semitism is alive and well. And, you know, there will be people who don't like what I'm going to say, Jake, but within Birmingham, there is a huge and large... I worked there for 15 years... 5 years for BRB. There is a large Muslim population, and, you know, there are two main football teams, Aston Villa and Birmingham, and that population is very close to both of those teams. And the inference here is that a group of community leaders, led by Muslims, led by the police, whatever, decided that it would be best not to have, quite rightly, as you said, Maccabi Tel Aviv. Of course, the Jewish community went, hold on a second, that's a bit harsh. You've been proven to be making stuff up. But it smacks of a bigger problem, doesn't it? It smacks of a problem that police and people in authority can make a decision. And I've said something before on this show, and I'd love your take on this, because some people don't like it. I find any racism abhorrent, OK, abhorrent. I want to make that point. But I do fear that we are getting to a point where anti-Semitism isn't treated in the same way as the appalling racism against other religions. I don't think it should be on the colour of your skin. I think it should be on what you believe in and how you are treated. And I wish, genuinely not saying this to you, I've said it for as long as I've sat here, that anti-Semitism was treated in exactly the same way as other forms of racism, because I think it's fundamentally wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. I think, excuse me, I think what the Aston Villa debacle has shown is that if you don't recognise and stand up against anti-Semitism when it's coming at you, you turn yourself into the instrument of anti-Semitism. And that's exactly what has been happening with the police in Birmingham, because what's been happening is that they've been manipulated by some Islamists. And I think the words that nobody is saying here is Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is an Islamist organisation that seeks to control our country and turn it into a Sharia state by working through the levers of government, the levers of officialdom, the levers of police.
Well, for people who think that you're talking outrageously, there was a video which we haven't got now, but I remember playing it about 3 weeks ago before the match was taking place, probably further back, when I think there were three, weren't there, Christian Muslim men, and they were basically saying, don't even bother coming, we're going to get rid of all the Jews. It was absolutely outrageous. I'm sure they haven't been prosecuted, but then that poor ex-Marine's been told for daring to say that an illegal migrant, some have attacked young children, and he's worried about his kids. He goes to court and could have gone to jail, for Christ's sake. We don't seem to get it right in terms of balance, do we, nowadays?
Yeah, there was a video of a local imam saying that he would show no mercy, quote unquote, to the Jewish and Israeli fans were they to come to Birmingham. And yet we're being asked to believe by police that it's the Israeli and Jewish fans that are the problem, even though they've caused no problem in 100 games. But look, this Muslim Brotherhood group was called 10 years ago by a government report a national security risk. Nothing's been done in the last 10 years. They've been embedding themselves throughout our Muslim communities and beginning to control the police and influence their decisions. That is serious. Who controls Britain's streets? It's starting to look as if Islamist thugs in part of the country are controlling it and controlling the police as well. The police needs to get its house in order, admit where it's been lying, where it's been covering its own backside, and start to take action against the actual Islamist thugs who are trying to bring us down, rather than the innocent Jews who just want to come and watch a football match.
And then when you have that discussion, people will say, let's just have the discussion, let's be open. It's the place where you come to speak freely. People will say, oh, you're being anti-Islam, you're being anti-Muslim, but nobody ever says you're being anti-Jewish. Presumably, let's be straight with each other, a large number of people will look at what's happening in Gaza and will believe that the Jewish community is utterly responsible for everything that's gone on and you're hateful and all that. I try very hard, because I've got Jewish friends, to point out that the only democratic elected state in the whole of the bloody Middle East is, in fact, Israel. The only state that isn't funded by the mad mullahs of Tehran with their terrorist organisations, the Houthis and Hamas and all those sorts of people, is, in fact, Israel. I'm not saying I agree with everything Netanyahu does, and I'm not saying I like what I see in Gaza, but I do think that Jews get the thin end of the wedge, and I've thought it for a long, long time, Jake. I think it's dreadful.
Yeah, I mean, look, war is horrible. That's why we try not to start them. That's why Israel didn't start this. It waged war in response to October the 7th, a little fact that most people often push aside. War is horrible, and it's even more horrible when it's broadcast in Technicolor all over social media and our screens in a biased way, without showing any of the dead combatants and terrorists, but only showing civilian casualties, giving us the impression that it's just a gratuitous massacre. And actually, it's just a war like the ones that we've fought. And what's the alternative that Israel had? Should it just have sat back and allowed Hamas to carry out that massacre and then allow them to do it again and again and again? I mean, right-thinking people understand that this is a justified war that Israel's been carrying out. But in terms of our problem here in Britain, that's what we need to talk about and sort out on our own shores. And it's not Islamophobic to point out that many Muslim communities are dominated by extremist elements who are controlling, in some cases, or seeking to control the police. Ordinary Muslims are being intimidated and prevented from speaking out and being pro-Israeli, pro-Jewish, pro-Western by these extremists who are presenting themselves as community leaders and seeking to enforce their extreme version of Islam on the rest of us. That's what we need to stand up against. That is not in any way bigoted or Islamophobic.
Trying not to lose my whatever and need to employ you. David Lammy facing new Labour backlash over undemocratic plan to cut jury trials. We know that. This morning he's accused of cynically manipulating rape figures to boost his case. I'd like to bring you, if I can, Quentin, to that story we've been running today about Jamie Michael, the ex-Marine who was arrested for something he put on Facebook, which basically said some underlined illegal migrants have committed crimes against kids. That concerns me. This went to trial. It lasted 17 minutes only, and now he's been banned from coaching his daughter's football team because this could be a safeguarding issue. What we are saying, and what free speech campaigners are saying, is that safeguarding concerns seem to be used increasingly to silence somebody with a view that's perhaps not in line with this government. What's your view on that, Quentin?
Well, you know, it's one of those things where safeguarding issues, of course, need to be taken seriously, but there needs to be, as you'd say, an element of common sense involved, where obviously spurious charges have been brought, that have been dismissed out of hand very quickly by a jury of your peers. One wonders where the common sense is in the decision to ban him.
I'd love your view on the Lammy thing, all joking aside. I know he's become somewhat of a figure of fun, but I was speaking to a barrister a week or so ago. I would have thought that having 12 of your peers across the democratic divide, let's say, social and democratic divide, provides the absolute legal safety net that our basic democracy is built upon, doesn't it?
Well, it absolutely does. And it's been in place for such a long time, and it works so well, that the thought that it could be used or abolished at the stroke of a pen because the government hasn't put in place proper measures that could be easily implemented to cut the backlog of cases is remarkable to me, because it seems to me, given Lammy's comments previously about how jury trials are important, a safeguard to democracy, etc., this has been done for pure economic reasons.
What would you said there about measures? What measures should be? Well, actually, your suggestion. What measures should be or could be brought in to implement changes that would mean that this backlog would dissipate? Because there's an 80,000 case backlog. I mean, I know what I do. What would you do?
Well, just as a practicing barrister, I go to courts all the time, and you'll see, for example, a 10-court centre, and there'll be only 6 courts sitting at any one time with massive capacity. The fact is that the Ministry of Justice has implemented something called sitting days, which is a maximum number of days that a court centre can sit, which actually is capped. So that was abolished for a while, but it was brought back in. And so what you have is you have courtrooms sitting empty, and you have part-time judges who have got a limit on the number of days that they can sit. You have IT systems that don't work properly. You have inefficiencies in the surrounding mechanisms like witness support, getting all sorts of things that can derail trials very quickly, haven't been properly funded and don't work properly. And anyone with an intimate knowledge of the justice system would know that there are some very simple measures. Get more courts sitting, get witness care people, get probation properly trained so that cases aren't delayed because, for example, witnesses don't turn up to court. All sorts of measures can be put in place that would be, in my view, much more effective than cutting some of our fundamental liberties.
I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, I went last week with the argument that, you know, if there isn't court space, which is what we were told, what about the Nightingale court system that seemed to work for hospitals during COVID? But you're saying, actually, it was really interesting, like having a debate about the NHS, that greater efficiency is needed to use the space that's viable and training needs to improve. I sort of agree with you, Quentin. It's almost like, oh, let's just get rid of juries. That's an easy answer. I think it strips away something that's really, really important. And I bring it back to this guy again. That guy, like him or loathe him, agree or disagree with what he's saying, we are supposed to be a free speech nation. He could have been found guilty like that by a left-wing leaning judge, couldn't he?
Well, yes. And you'll speak anecdotally to any number of barristers who would completely agree. I've done cases. I did a case recently involving allegations against a member of the public by an off-duty police officer. And I could tell running the trial that the judge was very hostile towards my defendant and hostile towards my case. And it didn't stop the jury from acquitting my client in under half an hour. And I personally believe that if that was in front of the judge, he would have been convicted for sure.
That's really, really interesting. Quentin, thank you so much, my friend. Really interesting to get your angle on that. I agree wholeheartedly. Before we talk about what I consider to be Badenoch doing a good job again this week, I'd like your response to this news story this morning because, Helen, it is disgusting, it is despicable. People are raging with this. 2 Afghan teenage illegal migrants jailed yesterday for raping that 15-year-old. One of the judges said to the Daily Mail, who fought fair play to them to get the guys' names, that the footage is so horrific that one of the lawyers said it would cause riots if it went public. I guess, like everybody else, you're fed up with it, but I want to ask the question, how have successive governments not worked out how to stop young men, unvetted, coming into this country when we read, and this is a fact, Helen Whately, 25% of sexual offences last year were carried out by foreign criminals. It's got to stop.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's disgusting, the specifics of that really horrific case. And as you say, the scale and those statistics that you just shared with people, I mean, this is the point, that those small boats where we have people coming in here undocumented, we don't know anything about their background, that has got to stop. And goodness, I'm so frustrated. I know that we didn't manage to do it when we were in government. We wanted to. We came across endless barriers, including the lawfare, and the European Convention on Human Rights getting in the way. And now we see Keir Starmer making absolutely no progress. He made all those promises and people feel totally let down.
And I think that's the point. I think there comes a point. I don't know whether you're a mother. I've got 6 kids. I am sick to death of hearing there isn't a will. I would say to every parent, were they political or not, we have to get our heads in a space where a government's responsibility, without going on about it, is to protect the people in this country. And all the do-gooders who say, oh, you're being really unfair to these poor men. No, I'm not. No, they're unvetted. They're throwing their passports to the sea. And they're coming here with, I think this is really powerful, and they're coming here with very different views about how they should treat women. And you know, that to me is red rag to a bull. But I just wanted to take your take. I know you also want to talk, and I salute Kemi Badenoch on this, accusing Labour overnight of lacking the political courage to carry out that grooming gangs inquiry. We're not having one. Then we said we're having one, said the Labour Party. We've heard very, very little. And in fact, Kemi Badenoch goes further overnight, which I think people will also be interested in. She says that mosques must be made to cooperate with any grooming gangs inquiry, and foreign sex offenders, hurrah, need to be kicked out of the UK, Helen Whately.
Yes, I mean, what we've seen with the government on the grooming gangs inquiry is them dragging their feet every step of the way. It's clearly extremely politically difficult for them for some reason. I think to most of us looking at it, and just the sheer horror of the scale over the many years and the failure to get to the bottom of it, and to see as that becomes clear, the government not leaning in and doing the most that they can do as fast as they can do is shocking and incredibly disappointing, clearly, for the victims who've come forward and had the courage to speak out about this. And that's why Kemi is so furious. And, she's been talking to the victims of the grooming gangs as well, and wants to see justice done for them.
It's interesting for me, you said, is it politically motivated? But unlike many politicians, you talked from a moral stance, which I like. But the truth of the matter is there were 5 independent MPs voted into constituencies simply on the Gaza ticket last time. Let's take Jonathan Ashworth, who's... I know very well, who lost his seat. He was going to be a cabinet minister. He lost by a few hundred seats to an independent who stood simply on Gaza. Would it be fair to suggest that the Labour Party is terrified of upsetting that Muslim vote, 4 or 5 million, by perhaps carrying this out? And for people who think that's an outrage, go and read the interview I did with the Chief Constable of Rotherham several months ago, who said we probably were a little bit, slow in dealing with this because we didn't want to stir up trouble amongst different races and religions in the area. For me, I don't know about you, I don't care about where you come from or the colour of your skin. I don't want kids being attacked in this country willy-nilly, like I don't want young girls being attacked. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, what we need to see is the government having the courage to do the right thing on this, and not being worried about some of their MPs who are sitting on small majorities and don't want to upset certain groups within their constituencies. I mean, I think the fact is, as you're putting it, we have to get to the bottom of this, and we have to get it to stop. It's the most disgusting thing that's been happening to girls. And we can't allow people's worries about how many votes they'll get from which groups in future elections to stop that getting fixed. I want
to just quickly, before I let you go, the Tories have also pledged today to block mobility access. This is presumably cars for people with ADHD and anxiety. Jesus, about time. Kemi said the proposal to tighten the rules was fair, proportionate and reduces the burden on taxpayers. I wouldn't be doing my job correctly, Helen, and we love having you on, if I didn't ask you this. Leaving the ECHR, being stronger on immigration, blocking mobility, why was none of this in the psyche of you guys when you were in government? Because this sort of stuff has been spouted by Reform for months, and it does to a lot of people, cynics, say you're playing catch-up. Why was not this mobility thing? Why was not all of those things that are speaking common sense to the Conservative voter in this country? Why has it taken Reform to lead the way, do you think?
Well, on the Motability point, so yes, we have said that we wouldn't allow people to continue to get those government-funded, taxpayer-funded cars unless they have severe disabilities. And the main reason why you're seeing such an increase in people claiming sickness benefits and then getting access to the cars is people getting benefits for common low-level mental health problems, things like anxiety or neurodiversity, specifically ADHD. So we've said we put a stop to that. We actually did try and reform that when we were in government, and this is the connection to the ECHR. And actually, there was a legal block because of our membership of the European Convention on Human Rights that stopped us doing that. To your question, why didn't we get out of it before the election? I mean, I think there was lots of toing and froing amongst the Conservative MPs at the time about that. What I would say is, we're now under new leadership, and Kemi Badenoch is taking a very clear position on this. She did a review about looking at in detail the questions about what the implications of leaving the ECHR and how would it affect Northern Ireland and Good Friday Agreement and questions like that. And she came to the clear conclusion, supported by her shadow cabinet, that we should leave because it's necessary to do things like stopping the small boats, deporting people who shouldn't be here in the UK, and indeed things like cracking down on the abuse of our benefit system.
Really good to have you on, and I genuinely appreciate it. It's good to get the Conservative view. It's important. If only our current government, who used to speak to me the whole time, but they won't come on this show, apparently, for reasons that we don't really understand. We had the news that Nigel Farage, yesterday, claims that he overspent on the election campaign in Clacton. This apparently being looked at by Essex Police. Don't know what your view is, not condoning if he's made a mistake, but to me this smacks of the establishment will do anything to try and bring Nigel Farage and the reform bubble to burst, talking about his Coots bank account, talking about this thing. They're not going to stop, are they? And the BBC thing was classic. They were slagging him. I thought his response last week was amazing. But does it not smack, Jack, of they really are starting to fear that Nigel Farage could make it to Downing Street and they're going to pull out all the stops, whoever they are?
Well, listen, I think there's 2 points there, isn't there? I mean, firstly, misreporting election spending is clearly a very serious crime and something the police will look into, whichever party is accused of doing it. But I think you are right, the fact that Nigel Farage, because he is so far ahead in the polls, because he was an underdog and basically on the margins of mainstream politics for so long, clearly now does have a target on his back. And many people with an axe to grind will be coming out of the woodwork in the next 4 years before the next election, trying to bring him down. Now, some of them might have legitimate grievances, and at the moment, the allegations from revolving around he was a schoolboy at Dulwich College do seem to be a he said, she said. There's no overwhelming proof apart from one person's word or several people's word.
I want to jump in. I want to jump in because, and I would never listen. I'm 60, and I do not. There isn't a racist bone in my body. I find it abhorrent. I've repeatedly sat here and said how the Jewish community have been absolutely destroyed in this country, how I hate all that. But I do think we are in danger, because I'm older and I'm the same age as him, right? I do think we're in danger of not knowing our arse from our elbow. I don't know what I said 49 years ago, and I do think that comment that he made about, the black and white minstrels and Alf Garnett and all that, ain't our fault, mum, right? I'm not going to go into details, but the truth of the matter is 50 years ago, the world was a very different place, and we have to surely get to a point where we say, well, we can't destroy somebody. I'm not sticking up for anybody that says anything that's wrong, but it's ludicrous, Jack. It's like, how long are we going to apologise for our history? How far are we going to go back and pull down all of these things? I don't know. Change the way you think, modernise, fantastic, totally supportive. But if you start going back retrospectively, I just think you're going to end up causing more mayhem. And what you'll do to the people who see Nigel Farage, if you like, as the saviour, this will merely reinforce that the establishment's out to get him.
Yeah, and that's a point that someone like Rory Stewart made. Has nothing in common with Nigel Farage whatsoever, is one of his main detractors, but made the point that actually, if you end up raking over what someone said as a school child, there's going to be no one that wants to go into politics left, because actually, they won't be allowed to have, they wouldn't be allowed to have made mistakes in the past. Everything has to be sanitized. The other side of the coin, which Farage's critics are saying, is that, what you say when you're 17 years old, if he's alleged to have said it, speaks to the character of the man who wants to be Prime Minister. So there's clearly two sides to this debate.
Do you think he's going to be strong enough, Jack, to take the barrage that's going to hit him in the next 3 years, yes or no?
I spent a lot of time with Nigel Farage in recent weeks, and this is a man who is determined more than most politicians that I've seen to win power. Someone that is absolutely laser focused in trying to professionalise his party. You think about parties that Nigel Farage has led in the past, the UKIP, Brexit Party. They've been a bit of a fringe rabble. Sometimes they have their meetings in pubs and they swill pints. And listen, that's part of Nigel Farage's appeal. But make no mistake, this is a man who I think has really set his sights on power and will try and do anything he can to actually achieve that. Now, I think that he himself is professional. Often with Nigel Farage, he's been let down by people around him. And I think that that is a real danger. Almost that sort of guilt by association, I think, is something which he runs a real risk of going into the next election, especially when they're, having to broaden their tent with all of these councillors and all these new candidates come up. Clearly, there's going to be bad apples. There's bad apples in every party, but I think that Nigel Farage is more exposed to those blowing up.
What he's the man in
he's got a target on his back.
We used to say he's the man in possession, isn't he? He's the man that you're aiming for. He's got a target on his back because he's leading in 171 opinion polls. Just very quickly before I let you go, Sir Keir Starmer this week saying that Angela Rayner will return to cabinet. Yesterday she jumped up to that employment rights bill that she was so going on about. It's been watered down already, and she's sort of this thinly veiled warning yesterday in the Commons saying don't bring it down, don't water it down anymore. Everybody knows that Starmer's on shaky ground. Do you imagine that our Ange will stand? Is she a viable opportunity? Is she a viable option for the Labour Party, or is she just going to cause trouble?
Well, bizarrely, Angela Rayner seems more powerful out of cabinet than she actually was when she was in it, because it seems that Keir Starmer and the rest of the cabinet are falling over themselves to praise her, bend to her whims, because for many of the people in the grassroots of the Labour Party, the left-wingers in the Parliamentary Labour Party, she is their Red Queen over the water. She was martyred by having to leave in that tax scandal, even though most people would see that actually, she definitely should have gone after not paying her stamp duty. In a pretty big scandal, actually, but it has made her some sort of
Which, by the way, Jack
martyr,
Elsom, and everybody listening who has any sympathy, she still hasn't paid HMRC back, and I think that's really, really relevant. I'd love to see Angela Rayner in charge of the Labour Party and Prime Minister, because I'd have a fun 3 years. But she literally 9 weeks ago had to resign, forced to resign, because the paper made her by doing a good job, right? She still owes 40 grand to the taxman. Fact.
Yeah, and I think the problem is that if Angela Rayner decided to... If there's a leadership election tomorrow and Angela Rayner decided to run, I think she would win pretty comfortably. I think she'd get the required nominations by the MPs, and then I think she'd absolutely walk the membership, because they are even more left-wing than the Parliamentary Party. Will she do it? I'm not so sure, because for the reasons you said. I think the scrutiny on her would be just so forensic and ferocious because of the recent scandal she's been in, not least the tax scandal. And so I don't think that actually you can get past that.
Well, it'd be interesting to see. Mate, as ever, thank you. So what does the rest of the day hold? You've clambered out of bed late to do this interview. Where are you off to now? Racing somewhere? Or are you actually doing some work today? What's going on?
Well, I've been up since 6 reading the papers, and then I'm about to go and walk into Westminster. Well, I'll be working late into the night after a long lunch and a few parties later in the evening. It's Christmas party season in Westminster, so there's a lot of swanky bashes that I have to attend because it's serious networking. So
I love the way you said swanky bashes. Are you at that swanky bash next Thursday at the House of Commons that I've been invited to?
Clearly, not even I, Jeremy, am important enough for the swankiest of all bashes. Which one's that?
I'm not prepared to say on air, but I'm surprised you. I'll get you an invite, Jack. Don't worry. Yesterday in the newspaper, it was all about Prince Harry. The big headline in the Sun. My security view is going to be reviewed. Turns out he wrote to Shabana Mahmouda asking for a review of the UK security. So presumably this backs up the belief that the Ginger One wants to return to these shores, which is ironic, because all he seems to still be doing is slagging off the royal family, liking them yesterday in some interview in the States to like Downton Abbey, but with more drama. He did that ridiculous Colbert interview we showed yesterday where he took the mickey out of Trump. He just, I don't get, he's obviously desperate to come back to the United Kingdom, but can't stop kicking the thing that keeps feeding him, right?
Yeah, and he was talking at a British-American council event in Santa Monica, and he sort of likened, you know, life to Downton Abbey. One's real life and the other's a television show, and we clearly know what he was implying. So once again, but he was saying the individual, the Britishness, it doesn't matter what we stand for. Well, I don't think what we stand for is slagging off your family, which it appears to be what he's doing. But more importantly, if he's gone to Shaboon Mohammed, who's got more than enough issues on her plate anyway, the fact is, Mother, could end up taxpayer-funded his security. Now, I don't disagree that he needs security, because he is, whether we like it or not, still a member of the royal family, just not a working member. But that means his status has changed. And every time he comes to this country, his security gets reviewed. He has to give them 30 days notice. So this is the problem, I think, because he spends most of his time dissing the royal family, but at the same time, he wants everything to come his way. And that sense of entitlement, I think, is what annoys so many people and probably members of his own family.
I think that word's a really good one, actually, entitlement, because, I'm a royalist, you're a royalist. There are people who are being encouraged not to be, I suspect, with all the shenanigans that have gone on. But when I think of William and Charles and Kate and everybody else, Sophie Wessex, the Duchess of Gloucester, extraordinary. People are putting the hard yards in. Princess Anne's a living example of that, and thus we as a nation give back. I find it galling as a taxpayer to think that because he's a prince that he doesn't want to be, and he doesn't want to live in this country, he wants to slag us off. When he chooses to deign us with his company, not that I want him here anyway, I'm supposed to pay for that. Pay for yourself. Well, either you're in or you're out. It's cake and eat it time. It's always been that way, in my opinion, with him and her. Always.
Yeah, and they want to be the sort of big celebrities and sort of calling the shots. And when he comes to this country, he wants to go on sort of quasi-royal tours and show everybody, look how wonderful I am and how much the public love me. And this is the problem for the royal family. He does still think that he is, has a very special case. I know he should have security because he is a member of the royal family, but it's the rest of his behaviour that I think people find reprehensible. And obviously, as a family, he's got his own issues with Thomas Markle in hospital. And, their talk of family, well, they seem to have a very misguided view of what family is all about. And they're lecturing us on how families come together. Well, she and he are part of a pretty divided family that makes even most soap operas look pretty tame by comparison.
Said it again. God, I wish we had a politician in this country that would call out how pathetically useless our London mayor is, Just Trump. I want to just concentrate on Trump. He's called out Mayor Khan, he's called out Europe. The press are writing over here that things are not all as rosy in the garden as they were, not just the peace deal, economically. Is the Trump bandwagon slowing, or is this just negative press? What's the feeling in the country?
Yeah, well, in terms of immigration, this was his #1 campaign promise, was to secure the border. We're almost a year in of this Trump presidency, and he's absolutely done that. On the economy, like you were talking about with your last guest, Americans aren't too happy. The economy is not so great over here either. Inflation remains high. The housing market is stagnant. It's really hard for young Americans to get in and be able to afford a home and become a homeowner. His approval rating, it's dropped to 35% the last I checked nationwide. On terms of national security, 44%, a little bit higher, like he delivered on the border. But inflation, 22% approval rating, not so great.
What sort of approval rating to politicians in America? Joe Biden, what was he, -80 or something? What was he on?
By the end of Joe Biden's term, it was less than 50%, not around, kind of similar to what we're seeing now. But you'd expect this to be higher for Trump this early on in his second term. We're not even at a year yet. And most Americans would agree that if you came to the US illegally and you've committed crimes here, you need to be deported. You deserve to be deported. Those are the type of people we want to get out of this country. But the people that came here illegally and they haven't committed crimes and they're working and they got an education and they're contributing to the economy, that's kind of the sentiment from Americans is, do you deserve to be deported if the only crime you've committed is coming here illegally?
We have a mayor in London called Sadiq Khan who's dreadful. I've got a clip from Donald saying what many never say in this country but should do. This is Donald on Sadiq.
You take a look at London, you have a mayor named Khan. He's a horrible mayor. He's an incompetent mayor, but he's a horrible, vicious, disgusting mayor. I think he's done a terrible job. London's a different place. I love London. I love London. And I hate to see it happen. You know, my roots are in Europe, as you know. Right. And I hate to see that happen. This is one of the great places in the world, and they're allowing people just to come in and unchecked, unvetted.
That's what we want to hear. You talk about your economy, but millions of people in this country, Heidi, would love to hear a politician saying those sorts of things, which we don't seem to get. He also said overnight about the peace process that Zelensky has until Christmas to accept that peace deal in Ukraine. I'd read an article that Donald Jr. had said a couple of days before he might walk away. He always made this thing, I can sort wars, I've sorted 8 wars. This one is dragging on and on. One day he seems to be anti-Zelensky, the next day he seems to be anti-Putin. He's banging his head against a brick wall. And I read a really interesting article in one of the Sundays that said Americans are saying all of that's well and good, but you need to get off Air Force One, get back here and sort out our lives. Would that be fair?
You know, when it comes to creating peace in Ukraine, Zelensky, he doesn't want to give up land, and Putin doesn't want to give up that land that they've taken since this conflict started 3 years ago either. I guess who is Trump going to strong arm harder? Is he able to get Putin to say, look, you got to give Ukraine that land back? Or is he going to strong arm the little guy, Zelensky, and say, look, you got to give up this land so he can end this conflict and get another peace win under his belt?
We love having you on, Heidi. Thank you so much. What time is it in Phoenix, Arizona?
Almost 2 a.m. I'm going back to bed.
Did you get up especially for this? You didn't stay up? Oh, blimey, Mrs. Thank you so much indeed. We love you, respect. Happy Christmas. Heidi Hummel there. There's been some talk about the economy. Today, the Tory party are going... Thanks, Jay. The economy, the Tories are taking on Rachel Reeves. They're tabling a motion in the House of Commons. You heard it from Mel Stride to say she's incompetent and she's lied to us. We're going to talk now to the economist, an author of the Substack When the Facts Change. He's a legend. We just hope he's in the chair. 3, 2, 1. Ace there, Liam Halligan. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
You're never going to let me forget that, are you, Jeremy?
Never. Not getting your orange juice this morning. You're back in front of that. You're back in front of that sign that looks like. I don't know why I'm going to say this, but I just feel the need. You look like you're in Amsterdam there, Liam. But there we go, son.
Amsterdam, East London.
I wanted to play you a clip of Esther McVeigh, who's just on the show, questioning Rachel Reeves on unemployment yesterday. If we could just play that clip quickly for Liam.
Does the Chancellor believe there is any link at all between her increase in employers' national insurance contributions, her job tax, and employment levels slumping to a 14-year low?
Yeah. It's just wrong.
Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the number of jobs has increased by 329,000 this year. That is the record of this government getting people back into work, and also through the youth guarantee, dealing with the fact that when we took office last year, 1 in 8 young people were not education, employment or training. That is your record. This government are addressing it.
Liam, if we get it away from personal, because every time I see Rachel Reeves, I think you're incompetent, you're out of your depth, and you just don't answer questions. But many politicians are like that and seemingly only ever lose the shackles when they're not in power. But Esther McVeigh made a very salient point about the state of this country, be it taxation, be it unemployment. I think many people would want you to answer this question. Economically, how bad is it?
Well, the situation is definitely pretty rough. We're not in a recession. The economy is not shrinking, but it's certainly stagnating. and business sentiment and consumer sentiment, by the way, really are at rock bottom, the worst since the height of lockdown pandemic, which of course shuttered the entire economy. What was going on there in the House of Commons between Esther McMay, former Tory cabinet minister, and Chancellor Rachel Reeves? Well, Esther McVey was rightly pointing out that Rachel Reeves's £25 billion annual increase in employer national insurance contributions has lowered employment. It has stymied the labour market. The number of payrolled employees has gone down every single month since Reeves announced that policy back in October 2024, and particularly since that policy, higher national insurance contributions, was introduced in April 2025. Reeves then countered, and by the way, the Bank of England agrees with that analysis, that her national insurance employer contribution rise has acted as a jobs tax. Reeves countered that employment has gone up. That's because a lot of people who haven't got jobs have got into self-employment. That's what's actually happening. Yeah. So payroll employment has gone down every month. The number of people trying to get ahead by going self-employed, people struggling often to provide for themselves and their families, has gone up. I think the absolute killer blow to Reeves, and I thought what she said there was pretty disingenuous, and she's getting a reputation going beyond all the jokes about chess championships and CVs. She's getting a reputation now in financial markets for really not being a straight dealer with the actuality.
Well, the Tories are actually bringing an emotion this afternoon, led by Mel Stride, who was on the show just a tick ago, saying, we actually know fundamentally that you've lied to the British people. I can never get away. You're an economist. I'm just an old man sat behind a microphone, but I can never get away. I've always judged people on, and, you know, you talk to them, you see them. I don't ever get the feeling, Liam, that she even believes herself what she's saying. She looks permanently like she's a rabbit caught in the headlights. And I don't want to be disrespectful because they made a big thing about being the first Chancellor of the Exchequer that was a woman. I think she's out of her bleeding depth, mate. I don't think she enthuses confidence amongst the electorate, certainly not amongst the banking fraternity and business in general. And they came to power saying growth, growth, growth. They have destroyed so many small and medium-sized businesses with their NI increase, and they have basically said, well, it's going to cost you a lot more to employ people, then workers' rights. I don't think they care about the working man and woman. I really don't. I genuinely believe that.
On the debate you just heard there between Esther McVey and Reeves, the killer fact that Reeves can't deny is that the headline rate of unemployment has gone up from 4.2% when Labour came in July 2024 to 5% now. That's, you know, a recent year high. That's the highest in 3 or 4 years. And the likes of the OECD, other independent think tanks are saying that unemployment is going to push up from 5 to 5.2, 5.3, 5.4%, above 2 million. Is she out of her depth? Okay, my view about Rachel Reeves, and I've known her many, many years, I do think she's got, you know, sufficient intellect to be an okay chancellor under normal circumstances, but these aren't normal circumstances, and she's a long way out of her depth. With respect, there's no other way for me to put it. But my main point, Jeremy, to you would be, is that she's actually using her mind and her brains to deflect and to deny and to impose her own ideological view on the world, rather than understanding, you know, how the world is actually behaving, how the economy is actually behaving.
There seems no plan B. It seems to me that they're not able to react. They're not proactive. There was one plan and that's it, and then there's stuff. That's how I see it.
There's one plan that is to increase the size of the state, increase welfare spending, and make Labour activists and economically literate Labour backbenchers, you know, happy, so they don't decapitate Reeves and Starmer, who, unbelievably, these people think Reeves and Starmer are too right-wing. I mean, that's really...
Well, we're looking at the education system with a concern that more teachers are going to go on strike at a massive, massive cost to the education of our youngsters who, let's not forget, during the pandemic saw their educational opportunities thwarted significantly. Let's get reaction now to the threat of more strikes, more industrial action in our schools from Stephen James, award-winning teacher. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, good morning, Mark. Great to see you.
It's lovely to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. So teachers have gone on strike outside their school over alleged gangs of male pupils trying to intimidate them in class and in the playground. Staff at Hayden Bridge High School in Northumberland are taking action over their appalling working conditions this Tuesday and Wednesday, with further strike days scheduled for later this month. Staff say, Stephen, that they feel unsupported by senior figures as they see little effort in being made to tackle these issues. Is behaviour in the classroom getting worse?
Look, I think what you've highlighted there in this particular school is, first and foremost, a real failure of leadership in a school. And the leaders of schools are so important because they set the tone. And if, sanctions aren't being enforced and pupils who are removed from class are sent straight back in, isolation is just a revolving door. Consequences, they don't stick. Pupils assume things that they do wrong don't matter. And leadership very much sets that culture. And school is very much a microcosm of society, and it allows you to push boundaries and explore who you are as a person. And if you never meet those boundaries, you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And if then when you get out into society, you were to behave the same way as you do in school, in your community, then likely you're going to fall foul of law enforcement as well.
Well, that's exactly right. And teachers do a good job. They don't get paid enough to put up with violent threats from students, do they?
No, absolutely not. And I'm no big fan of the unions. I felt during COVID they got very political in what they were doing. But I think in this case, the industrial action that's happening is ultimately a reflection of the inside of that particular school, and any particular kind of wider strike action. I think if it were to spread from that school, I can't see it, because individual head teachers in individual schools have the authority to enforce sanctions, enforce rules. But I think we also need to shift it away slightly from the school and the leadership and the teachers, because ultimately, parents they spend most of the time with the children to enforce rules and enforce standards. And if you've got absent parents, boundary-free households, and a culture where every sanction is treated as an attack on the child, and it just makes discipline completely impossible. And I've got a teenage daughter and a 10-year-old daughter, and there are times when you just think, you can kind of get on with that. But they're the times you have to stop yourself, because every time you let that slip, standards are falling in the household.
Stephen, can you give my viewers and listeners a sense of what it feels like to be a teacher in the front line when dealing with aggressive, threatening and violent pupils?
Well, I can talk about primary schools, and in that case, it didn't happen so much for me, because one, I was a man, and so children were very reluctant to get violent or aggressive. But I did witness female staff being pushed, hit, even spat on, and those kinds of things. If that's starting in primary school, it only gets worse and worse and worse as you get into high school. And I'm sure you remember what it was like to be in school, maybe back in the 90s, like myself.
Yeah.
And things were rough, and ultimately you were brought back into line by the staff and by your cohort as well, because no child has the right to remove education away from other children either. And that disruptive, low-level behaviour is, if that's constantly happening, then it's going to ruin the potential of all those other children who are actually getting on with things.
Yes, well, on a rare occasion, I actually support this industrial action if it means that teachers feel unsafe going about their daily duty educating youngsters. What's going on here? Do we understand that it's now the case that Thomas Markle is in possession of correspondence from the Duchess?
Yes, well, they think a letter has arrived, but we're not allowed to know what it is. I mean, she's told him that he can't actually show anyone. It's not her business. She doesn't run him. She doesn't even find him. So I think it's disgusting, her behaviour. She will take a plane and go to win any type of programme, whether it's clothes, whether it's being wonderful and mother, anything like that. She'll be in a private plane no problem, but she won't go to him. And it's very interesting to work that out. There's two things, I think. One is that she was determined to win for some reason, maybe that he allowed this photographer to take pictures before they got married, and she didn't like that. It could be that, or it could be that she felt that she was too grand for him. So she's either got that, or she feels that she just can't, she's too scared to speak to him, because why shouldn't she fly over? I mean, it's absolutely absurd. And she's using somebody else has done it badly, not me, blaming the male. And that's fascinating, because she says the male is behaving unethically. So I looked up ethically, and it's moral principles. Well, if anyone hasn't got moral principles, it's definitely Meghan. It won't go back before she got married, but the way she's treated the royal family, the way she's actually not allowed her children to meet their family, and you can go on for what she said, all the lies she said. So she's not someone who can complain about ethical behaviour.
Well, definitely, and she's angry with the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday, which, of course, the Mail on Sunday is a publication that the Duke of Sussex unsuccessfully sued a couple of years ago, had to settle at a cost of $1.5 million to him. So there's no love lost between the Sussexes and the Mail newspaper. And they're not happy because Thomas Markle gave a tell-all interview to the paper last Sunday. And the reason why he did is because the woman that has been there for him in his hour of need is Caroline Graham, the Mail on Sunday's, is she the royal correspondent, royal editor of that paper?
Yes. I mean, she's entitled to go along.
Oh, I think she's the US editor, I think.
Yeah, she's been friendly with him for years now. Why can't she go and talk? But Meghan says she can't go and see him, or she can't phone him, because somebody might hear it. There might be a journalist there who's listening, and she wants something private. So therefore, she's not going to do it. Now, anybody who wants to talk to someone who's ill in a hospital can speak to a nurse and say, would you mind just asking the friend, your journalist, whatever, to leave while I have a private conversation with my father? They do it straight away. So she's blaming anyone. She also refers to herself as Duchess. She's talking about her father, I'm the Duchess, right? Now, when she's on Netflix, she's saying, love her name, doesn't she?
It's true,
Meghan,
with love, Meghan.
Meghan, yes. So it's absolutely terrible that she is trying to be several stairs above her father. So she's but not for all the people that she doesn't know. I mean, you can't actually make that realistic. She must be furious because her PR are absolutely pushing her to be nice and to do something, but she won't, because she has to win the fight, which was many years ago, and she won't go there, and she won't even let him see the children, and that just breaks your heart, really. Poor man.
One of the nice things that she should be doing is paying his medical bills.
Ah, absolutely right, yes. But she won't do that. I can't believe that she'll do that, because she doesn't want him alive, really, does she?
Now, that's a very powerful thing to say, Angela.
Well, it is very powerful, but if she did, she'd be rushing there and she'd be trying to organise it. She would put him in a very good hospital in the USA so she can go and visit him. I mean, how can you leave somebody like that? Her half-brother and her half-sister don't have money. They're in terrible trouble now. They can't afford to pay anything. Is it coming from her? Absolutely not. She's supposed to be a millionaire, or, Harry's a millionaire. They've got loads of money. But actually, for her father, it's not there. And if you hear what she wrote to her father when she was in her teens, she thanked him so much for everything. She thanked him for helping her, for giving her the strength to want to be a journalist, to be an actress.
Yeah.
And she all those things. It was a delightful letter, and then suddenly she doesn't want to know anything about him, and I think it's all sort of hierarchy. She's too grand now. She's
Angela, and I hear you. I'm no cheerleader for Meghan Markle, as any viewer of my YouTube channel, which focuses on royal news, the Mark Dolan Show, will attest. It's a little harsh on the Duchess, though, to suggest that she would wish her father dead. Surely that wouldn't be what she thinks, and surely she would deny that.
Well, I might be cruel, but I just think that unless you try hard, it doesn't matter if she doesn't like him, but I think it's absolutely her duty to go there and speak to him and be kind and to help him.
Definitely. By the way, do you know, Angela, what may be in that letter?
No, I don't know. I don't know whether it's a loving letter or it's a letter for telling him off. It could be anything.
And now you've said that she doesn't want him to reveal the contents of that letter.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, he's not allowed to. And I'm sure he will, because why should he listen? She's not in control of him. He doesn't have to listen to a daughter who doesn't see him or speak to him for 7 years. So I find it's very difficult, isn't it? If it was a loving letter, if it was something, I'm so sorry about this, I really do hope you feel much better, that sort of makes me sort of sound even worse. But if this is, why did you let the publicity come out? This is not allowed, it's not ethical. She might do that. She can take either thing, or she can just say, I've been told to write to you, so here it is. I'm sorry to hear about it. Yours sincerely. You can't imagine what the letter would be, but you can imagine that she's using the name Duchess, and calling all of us is called, to us she's called Meghan. It sort of bores me over.
Well, indeed. Before I let you go, how damaging could this be to Meghan Markle's reputation?
I think it's hugely damaging, because everybody feels that even if you don't like a parent, but when they've had such a terrible thing, he's nearly died, he's had most of his leg taken away, you can go back and say, look, let's start again, let's be kind, I'm so sorry about this, why don't I show you the pictures of the children? There's loads of things that you can do, but I think that people feel that she's got no right to do nothing, especially he doesn't seem to have done anything wrong. He looked after her while her mother wasn't around during her teenage years, and he did his absolute best for her. He adored her. And if somebody loves you, even if you don't, and they're so ill, I think you should go along and try and make things a bit better. It's not too difficult, especially you love taking planes all over the place to win. She has got the money. She borrows planes all the time, so she could easily do it. And I think it's that which she won't give anything. And that shows you how determined she is. It's absolutely, she has to win.
Prince Harry is not without empathy. He can't be happy about this drama, Angela.
No, I'm sure he isn't. But do you think she's going to listen to him? Of course not. They're not getting on very well at the moment. They do phony kisses so the public see, but actually, you need a kiss at home, not really just to prove that you're kissing. And I think that he's probably quite shocked, but he might not be. He's not in the right place to tell her what to do with her father, you see. She should know what to do with her father. She should behave herself and just be polite. She doesn't have to be all sloshy and, cuddle and kissing, but she should be there polite and say, I'm so sorry that you're in this state. If there's anything I can do, please let me. And he says, I want to see you. Okay, I'm coming. We have to change our feelings about people according to what happens to them, I think.
You're lucky to have me here this morning. I fought my way across Sadiq Khan's war zone. I had to change tubes once. Fortunately, my phone wasn't nicked, but here I am just in time for your interview.
Well, we're delighted to have you. Is this government wicked?
I couldn't concur more with what you've just said. I think this government says one thing and does another. I think it's got a Fabian agenda, which I did use that term in the House when I asked the Chancellor a question this week. I honestly don't think they either know or care about the damage they're doing to the real economy in Britain. I think they've got this agenda, Mark, to try and make everybody equal and make everything equal for everybody. And, you know, my favorite quote is Solzhenitsyn, who said, people are born with different capabilities. If they're equal, they're not free. And if they're free, they're not equal. And I think that, in a very short, succinct summing up from a man who basically spent a lot of his life in a gulag standing up for what was right, I think he's spot on. And I think everybody needs to absorb and think about that. So I think they're running a Fabian agenda. I don't think they know what the truth is. I don't think Rachel Reeves is qualified to be the Chancellor. I don't think Keir Starmer's qualified to be the Prime Minister. And frankly, Roger Bolton's cant, which you've highlighted just now, that's yesterday's game, and it's time people woke up and got real now.
What are the ideological roots of this Fabian agenda of which you speak?
Well, I think it's basically an agenda to try and undermine a productive capitalist society. It's got its sort of roots in a form of Marxist. And Keir Starmer, remember, is a Pabloist and a member of the Haldane Society. He's got all the badges of what I call Marxist sort of belief. I understand his mother imbued him with a lot of this stuff. And, you know, I don't think you can, when you watch what he says and how he says it, it's just not believable. So I think they've got a malign agenda. Most of the Labour Party are members of the Fabian Society. Its motto, or its emblem, is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I think everyone should do as much research on the Fabian Society as they possibly can. It's not a good development for the country, and it's hollowing out the private sector, Mark. The private sector, we're losing all our rainmakers, we're losing all our sort of best brains, which is the most important thing. You cannot replace brain power. They're taking their wealth with them. And other parts of the world are benefiting. You know, Milan, you've got Dubai, you've got Greece, you've got Mauritius, you've got almost every part of the world benefiting from this. And it's not, they say it's not happening. It's happening at scale, Mark. So it's going to damage us long term if we don't stop it.
Well, indeed so. Another concern now, this was an embargoed story which has broken this morning. Police will never be able to record 100% of offenders' ethnicities. Your reaction?
Well, I think that's outrageous. And we've actually done a post this morning. I think we've got to actually look at all the data and work out why. And as you know, I've got the private rape gang inquiry that's been crowdfunded by over 20,000 concerned citizens. I'm afraid that there is a correlation in that case between Pakistani Muslim men and these rape gangs who've been operating throughout the UK. They're not in silos, they're everywhere. And from the research we've done, it's very worrying. So I think not to collect the data is a huge error. And what it tells me is they're worried about the outcome of collecting the data, which is going to tell them the truth. So as you probably saw, the government's appointed a Labour apparatchik to chair their rape gang, their statutory rape gang inquiry. I did offer my help. They have effectively declined that in the chamber this week. Mahmood said, send me any information I've got, but don't offer to meet her. Well, I can tell you we're planning on, we've got our hearings in the first 2 weeks of February, and we are going to have our hard-hitting report out by the end of March. And we're not frightened to talk about the facts. And if the facts mean we have to talk about ethnicity, then we have to talk about ethnicity. It's as simple as that.
And why is ethnicity important in relation to crime? Don't you just have good people and bad people?
Well, I think with the rape gang inquiry, and people like Emily Maitlis say, well, the majority of rapes are committed by white men. Well, that may or may not be true, because we actually live in, surprisingly, still a white majority country. But if you look at the rape gang activity across Britain, which is, by the way, linked with the taxis, which we've uncovered at this taxi registration in Wolverhampton, I think there is a correlation there with the lack of respect which Islam holds white working class girls in. And this is a very unpleasant business which has been allowed to fester for the last 20, 25 years. So, look, there are good people and there are bad people, but there are crime trends, and I think you have to collect all the data to be able to work out where the correlations lie and actually what's creating the issues. If you don't have that, you can't make decisions. It's a bit like, you know, the whole of government accounts that I'm going on to talk about at the Public Accounts Committee in a minute. The fact of the matter is, if you put rubbish into your system, data is very powerful, but rubbish data is very dangerous. And I think a lot of the data that's now being collected by the state, Mark, is either deficient or it's based on unaudited accounts, incomplete accounts, and it is misleading. So if you put together lots of misleading information, you just end up with one big misleading mess.
Indeed. And you know that you mentioned misleading. What's important for my viewers and listeners is to have the truth. And you mentioned regarding ethnicity that if it's an aggravating factor, which, for example, in the grooming gangs, it was because these young white girls were targeted because they weren't Muslim and they were not from within that Pakistani Muslim community. So that's a racially motivated crime. Setting aside illegal immigration, most people of sound mind think that we've got to stop the boats. But there's a conversation to be had, Rupert, about the crime statistics around people that have also entered the country quite legally. There is an issue with ethnic crime in this country if you look at the numbers.
Look, Mark, we found that is the case in our Pakistani rape gang inquiry, which we launched because effectively the government said they'd have one and they didn't. They tried to silo a few areas which would not be representative. Nigel Farage promised one and didn't have one, so we've done it, and my team's done a great job on collecting all the evidence from the witnesses and getting the bundles ready. It's taken a lot of work, and that's all ready to be heard at the hearing. Look, the fact of the matter is, if you're going to make good decisions, you need good data. And the reason we got the Pakistani rape gang issue is because people were frightened of being called racist. They were frightened of actually speaking the truth. And at the end of the day, that happens when you get a monopolistic BBC, which starts peddling DEI, which has been happening increasingly since the Blair government. It's been embedded into almost every civil service department. It's been embedded throughout the country in all our big corporates. And what it means is people are frightened to speak the truth. And what we have to do is purge ourselves of that. We have to repeal the legislation which is forcing people not to confront the truth. It is the truth that matters, and it doesn't really matter how unpleasant the truth is. We have to face up to it. So crossing the street to the other side, as we know from the Bible, is a bad idea. And at the end of the day, we have to meet all this head on. We cannot move forward as a country until we allow the sanitizing effect of the truth to cleanse us, because I think we've been infiltrated with deceit. I think the country has become dishonest. And until we can actually have a frank conversation based on the facts and the truth, we can't really move forward. That's my view.
As sure as night follows day, you have a budget which is focused on, tax rises and welfareism, and the economy shrinks. Go figure. Now, of course, I know that October doesn't relate to what happened in November, but this is all a long-term consequence of the Halloween budget. Things are only going to get worse.
Exactly right. It's tied to the budget this year, and that in turn is tied to the budget last year. What on earth did the Chancellor think she was going to get? If you whack up taxes on British people and British businesses, 40 billion last year, 26 billion in the budget this year. If you add regulations on businesses and stifle people's entrepreneurial spirit, and then you tell working people that all their tax money is going to pay for people to have higher benefits, you're not going to get economic growth. We've had 3 months of declining growth, and now we're in shrinking economy territory. That's a terrible end to a very bad year, and it would be no surprise to you, no surprise to me, that the Chancellor bears the responsibility for all of that.
Socialism, the failed idea that never goes away.
You'd think we would learn better. Remember that golden period that we had, when that era where people felt this country was in, predictable decline, changed in the 1980s, and then encouraged actually by a Labour government, that consensus that said, if you give people the opportunity to take a risk, and they do that wisely, and they make a return, then that's good for everyone. Let them keep sort of their money so they can reinvest and grow the next business for our economy. They'll create more jobs for people and create higher wages for people, and it will help us with our exports. That spirit of enterprise was then and remains now the key to economic growth. But if you look across the Labour front benches, hardly any of them, and certainly the Treasury, I don't think any of them, have had any experience in the real world outside of the political class or the public sector. No real experience of trying to start a business, grow a business, and employ people. And that's a shocking indictment on a government, that they can't have a Treasury team that at least has some people with expertise in that area.
Do you think the Conservatives, the opposition, needs to challenge the idea, the narrative, that it was the Tories that wrecked the economy, given the fact that there was a global pandemic in which we paused the economy for 2.5 years and paid healthy people to stay at home, and given the fact that there was an invasion of Ukraine which saw the government subsidise every single British person's energy bills? I don't know how good your memory is, Richard, but the economy was in pretty good shape in 2019 before the pandemic.
Yeah, look, I mean, ultimately it's for the British public to sort of assess what they think, and last year people's views about that period of government were very, very negative, and the economy was part of that. People were suffering. I mean, fundamentally, across democracies, if people feel the squeeze, if the cost of living when they go and do their grocery shop, when they fill up a petrol tank, if that's going up and up and up, government's going to find it very, very difficult to get their trust. But your fundamental point, I think, is something I do think the Conservative Party, and we are under Kemi Badenoch, getting back to, which is that core focus on the economy, that belief in free enterprise, that belief that effort deserves a reward, that it's not the government's job to give you a handout. It's your job to go out and make money for yourself, for your family, and then hopefully for the rest of the economy. That core message is a message the Conservative Party should be proud about our history in that, both in the long term and also in the future as well.
Well, I think it's just lazy shorthand. Tories wrecked the economy. You know, we had COVID and we had the war in Ukraine. That is the lion's share of why we are where we are now, and it's disingenuous of Labour not to point that out. However, if I am to look at the legacy of the Conservatives in power for 14 years, one thing is true. The size of the state grew, the welfare budget grew. Why can we trust a party that allowed that to happen to fix Britain's problems going forward?
With the story of two halves, as I think the football analogy goes, period from 2010 to 2019, coalition and then Conservative administrations, was a period where we were dealing with the effects of a very substantial overspend by government under the last Labour government. You know, no money left, a little note by Chief Secretary Treasury. And that was a really good time. Ironically, when people talk about public services, that's the period where public service productivity went up. That's when all the money you pay in your taxes for things like GP services, for education, etc., the productivity was going up. The second half was that period from 2019, maybe a little bit earlier, where we're dealing with the consequences of the referendum, the consequences of COVID, the consequences of the Ukraine invasion. And all of those, I think, did mean that the focus of politics was very much on dealing with the immediate, and that there was a loss of focus. I mean, I'm saying this about the Conservative, but there was a loss of focus, those core Conservative principles of free enterprise, the fact that the state has to live within its means. Those are the principles that we're getting back to at the heart of our mission with Kemi Badenoch. And my job as Chief Secretary, just to round up the things that you were talking about earlier in terms of defence, is making sure the state lives within its means, making sure that we don't put more rocks on the backs of our young people by passing on debts and obligations to them, and create the space to fund the military we need.
Most definitely. Why did the Conservative Party shift leftwards? If I take your word for it, Richard, that this is a changed Conservative Party that's getting back to its core principles, why did it abandon them for so many years, particularly under the likes of Theresa May, who signed up for that egregious net zero timeline, which her Chancellor at the time, Phil Hammond, said would cost £1 trillion. Where did the party go so wrong? Why did the Tories become so left-wing?
I'm not sure it's a matter of left or right. I think it's a matter of the principles that you have. I mean, the Conservative Party has had a coalition of voters around it who are galvanised by a sense of that the party was the party of prudent management of the finances, that was the guardian of our defences of our country, that was the guardian of traditions, and those have always been true and continue to be true. But I do think that the period of trying to deal with sort of a once in 100 years pandemic, the first invasion of Europe for 50 or 60 years of significant scale, that caused so much disruption in the way the Conservative Party was dealing with those and the messaging that the core principles sort of got pushed into the background. But on the specific point about net zero, I think, my personal view is I think that was a mistake. I wasn't in Parliament then. I do think it was a mistake. It was a sign that the mission of net zero overtook the reality of what it means for households. Conservative economics have to be rooted in what it means for the households of people who get up every day, go to work hard to give their children a better future.
Is net zero unconservative?
I think the ideology of net zero is both unconservative and completely uneconomic. I mean, if you just say we've got to achieve net zero, regardless of what the costs are for the families, you are going to lose public support, no matter how good it might be as a goal. If you aren't honest with the public about what it's costing, if you don't do it at a pace that people can afford, they're going to rebel and say, don't do it. One of the biggest problems this country has isn't the pace that we're achieving net zero. It is the cost of energy that is putting many of our businesses out of business. They cannot compete. Let's focus, as the Conservative and Claire Coutinho are doing, on a low-cost energy plan, a cheap energy plan. That's the way to get growth in the economy.
And Richard, before I let you go, we've been having a conversation today about the remarks of the head of NATO, who said that Europe needs to prepare for war. We know that's the case. The economy is a big worry. It shrank in October. You can't fight a successful war if you don't have a good economy. It's a national it's a national security issue. But I've got viewers and listeners to the show saying that they wouldn't really want to fight for Britain in 2025. It's a country they don't recognise. You know, if you're patriotic, if you've got the flag, apparently, you're a racist or you're far right. People look at the porous borders. You've got legal net migration crazily high under Boris Johnson, up to 1 million people in a year. And then you've got the boats. People are saying, why should I fight for this country? Does that concern you, given the fact that this is a country that has been presided over by the Conservatives for 14 years? It's a legacy of Tory rule that we've got a country now people don't want to fight for.
Well, I did listen, Mark, to some of your viewers' comments, and I think one of them, he was a gentleman who'd served in the British Army and then was a police officer for a number of years, and I listened to his comments about the pride in his country. And when he was in the army, he would have fought in a uniform which would have had the Union Jack on the side of his jacket, and that's an important signal. When we think about our flag, it is something we should be proud of. It is something that we should unite behind, and it is the purpose of politicians of all parties to make sure that people like your viewer and lots of other people believe in our country, about the mission of our country, and that our country is worth defending. On your calls, you've had a number of people point some of the concerns that they have. I hope the Prime Minister, I hope all political leaders are listening to that. But ultimately, in the end, we can't segment our country out into different sections and then say, well, because of that, we can't fight. We have to find a unifying mission behind our country's flag as part of the preparation for making sure that we can defend our own country should we need to, given the increasing risks we face from Russia.
Yes, but this sort of, self-loathing, this wokery that's entered our public institutions did happen on the watch of the Conservatives. We can't blame Labour in a year and a half for delivering a country that people don't want to fight for anymore.
Well, there are long-term issues. It is interesting. You talk about the sort of the wokery in our institutions. That's the ideological part. And I think what your callers were talking about more,
which festered under the Conservatives.
Look, I mean, you and I are probably talking the same language on that. It is not right that we have an ideological mission in our public services in particular that is at odds with the national mission of the people as a whole. Those things have got to work in tandem, together. They have to be aligned. And at the moment, I'm afraid that has the attitude in particularly in our public institutions, but also in some large corporations, needs to change, needs to focus back on what is in our national interest, our shared national interest, rather than some people trying to say, well, we're going to define people because of this particular characteristic or that. We cannot have identity politics in an era of preparation for difficulties ahead.
Richard, I know you're busy, just a couple of seconds, but can you understand why my audience don't want to fight for Britain when they see illegal boat crossings up to 1,000 men a day landing on our shores? Can you understand why that dampens their appetite for war?
I don't know if I make the precise connection. I think there are two issues. I can think why many people in this country are completely frustrated and some quite angry that we aren't stopping the boats. In fact, those crossings are going up. You know, it took the Conservative Party a little bit too long to come up on the right answer, which was, we call it Rwanda, but offshore processing. Other European countries now are saying, well, let's go and do that. And what has Labour done? Labour has scrapped it. They're out of touch, not only out of touch with the British people, but out of touch with their European counterparts, who now realise that what the Conservatives proposed with offshore processing was the right answer to stop those illegal crossings across the Channel.
Most definitely. I've got scores of people messaging the show, leaving voice notes and calling, saying they would not fight for Starmer's Britain.
And frankly, I'm not surprised. And, you know, it's a curious thing because, you know, I was listening to some of those messages coming in, and the sentiment is very similar in every instance. But, of course, what's most interesting about this is what Mark Rutte, the chief of NATO, is suggesting is that we have sort of a continental-wide situation where everybody is preparing for war. And it would be people who are a little bit younger, I suspect, than a lot of the people texting in and calling in. And I suspect that many of them would be even less inclined than a lot of your listeners would be to step up and defend Britain. And of course, that is because of one of the things that somebody who texted in said, which is how people are being treated. I think that, you know, a generation or two of younger people, and when I say people, let's be clear here, we mean young men. That's actually who we're talking about. It's not young women that are going to be sent to the front lines.
Correct.
But these young men who are locked out of a housing system, who are in a situation where wages are artificially suppressed, and they're artificially suppressed for two reasons, one of which is mass migration, but the other is in a bid to have financial equality. Male wages have been kept low in order for women's to be allowed to catch up. These people who are told that they are racist, that they are bigots, that they are dangerous, that they are potentially very violent at any stage, that these people would lay down their lives for what is an older generation, let's be clear, an older generation that has put them in this situation, and that is, broadly speaking, antithetical to a lot of the things that they think this country stands for. I don't think that this would happen. And of course, I think we also need to take this thing into an element, which is, of course, the sheer number of people who are in this country who are not fully British, who are dual nationals or are the children of migrants, or who in fact are migrants themselves, have come here very recently. There is no guarantee that a huge swathe of people who are in this country and who would be of age would be interested in fighting for this country. And the example that I would give, and this is interesting, of course, because we're talking potentially about fighting Russia, is when Russia announced general mobilization to fight in Ukraine. And overnight, hundreds of thousands of young men who had dual passports for places like Kazakhstan and Belarus and all of those places in Russia, they just left. Overnight, they said, we're not interested in being Russian anymore. Up until this point, when the opportunities were there, when the job opportunities were there, we were more than happy to be Russian. But the second that it comes to actually being asked to fight for your country, we're not interested at all and we'll flee. And I think that's exactly what would happen in the UK if we announced general mobilization or conscription. Hundreds of thousands of young men who up until now would have shouted, oh, I'm British 100%, would go, yeah, maybe not.
You're absolutely right. I've got so many messages on this, Benedict. Mike in Dorset, good morning, Mark. Two-tier call-up, do me a favour. Young men of fighting age who have recently arrived in this country will be overlooked for recruitment, whilst my 28-year-old son will be sent his call-up papers and will be prosecuted if he refuses. Worse still, during his absence, hate people will be pushing their agenda to take over and crush the indigenous population. Cliff in Berkshire, Mark, Putin may be many things, but he's not daft. Why would he take on the whole of Europe and her allies? I honestly believe that the gangster state, both the UK and the EU, seem intent on having a war just to show that the deluded EU-UK are a world power. Yeah, you do have to wonder, don't you, why NATO are being so belligerent and pugnacious in their language. Why are they talking up the prospect of war, given that there isn't tangible evidence that war is coming?
I think that this is, when we say NATO, I think we need to think more in terms of Europeans. I think that this is European nations getting quite jumpy because the United States has proven to be what they would say an unsound ally. The United States has made it clear that it is less interested in defending European interests than it was under previous administrations, and we all know why that is, because Donald Trump has said, and this is not unfair, that European nations are not pulling their weight financially or militarily when it comes to the alliance. So they have said, we're going to step back, we're going to focus on other theatres, other arenas where we think it's more in our interest to do so. That means the Strait of Taiwan, basically. And now European nations, having been given about 10 years' notice that Russia was on the rearmament footing, was more interested in the satellite states around it. 10 years ago was when this started kicking off. Even now, they have dragged their feet, believing that the US would save them or that nothing bad would actually happen. And now they are overcorrecting, overreacting, because they're spooked. They didn't think Donald Trump would win a second term. They didn't think the war in Ukraine would still be ongoing. And now they don't know what to do. They know that it's going to be very expensive and very costly, so they are getting quite nervous.
Most definitely. Betty says, good morning, Mark. More noise from failing governments trying to distract you and NATO trying to keep its funding. Ukraine kept Russia at bay for 5 years now. They will not invade or start a war with the EU. Wills in Wigan says, good morning, Mark. Why would anyone want to fight for Britain today? Look at the way successive governments have treated our veterans. And speaking of veterans, we've got an unnamed texter who says, good morning, Mark. I'm a veteran of 25 years and you asked if I would fight for Starmer. Why would soldiers do that when in 10 years' time Starmer and his woke ECHR-loving cronies come after soldiers for doing their duty? This man and his party are a complete joke. It is shocking. And what about this from Pam? Good morning, Mark. The way this country has deindustrialised, how will we build the ships, planes and armaments? Our steel and mining industry is gone, and so have the skills. Pam raises a good point, Benedict, and there's another concern, which is the two budgets that we've just had, which have destroyed growth, which would weaken our position in any future war. We're effectively deindustrialising with net zero, and we've created a culture of welfarism where we pay healthy people to stay at home. We are certainly in no position to fight a war.
Yeah, I think that point about welfare is very true, and I think Pam's point about an industrial base is completely true. You can't fight a war if you don't have a viable industrial base, and it's not that ours is just sort of reducing, it's that we're losing key knowledge and key technology that is incredibly difficult, once got rid of, to actually get back. I mean, the damage that's been done to the economy, not just by Labour, it must be said, by the Conservatives as well, the short-sightedness in terms of allowing ourselves not just to be a military power, but to be an industrial power, is extraordinary. What has been done, the short-sightedness of the activities of successive governments has been absolutely extraordinary. But the other thing that I think is very curious, and I think is worth touching upon here, because very often over the last couple of years, we've heard two things in this country. From the left, we've been told that the far right is a danger, and the far right is on the march, and the far right is always present. And on the other side of the divide, we're told civil war could come to Britain any day. And there's one thing that's always kind of stuck in my mind which makes both of these claims nonsensical, which is, of course, that in both cases, in all cases where you've seen fascism actually come to power in Europe, A, or a major overthrow of government, either communist or fascist, B, that is to say civil war, there has been the absence of one key thing in Britain that all of those countries did have, and that is a large number of especially lower working and lower middle class, military-aged, military-trained men. There would have been no fascist overthrow in Italy or Germany without the First World War. There would have been no Bolshevik revolution in Russia without the First World War. For these things to have happened, they needed huge numbers of armed men, trained men. We don't have that in this country. But you know what would be a really surefire way to make sure that we had those men in this country? Would be general mobilization and possibly even a war with Russia. And I think what a lot of your callers and texters have been saying about how people would come home to find themselves demoralized and their institutions destroyed, those are the same sorts of things, the same sort of factors that we saw in the early 1920s that led to the rise of fascism in Italy and led to the rise of Nazism in Germany. And you just think, if our politicians are really so short-sighted that they talk at length about the dangers of the far right and the dangers of civil war, why would you contribute to the circumstances that historically have led to both those things happening in Europe?
Most definitely. Now, briefly, if you can, Benedict, let's finish on Ed Miliband, a fresh new headache for him. And it relates actually to an excellent text from Dave in Gloucester, who says, "Good morning, Mark. I live in a fairly rural area, which is South Gloucestershire, but driving home yesterday afternoon, I saw a sign that made my heart sink. It said solar farm traffic. Miliband's madness is slowly spreading insidiously through the beautiful British countryside and will destroy it forever." I will say that these solar farms are incredibly bad for the environment because they are massive pieces of technology that blight the land, which are made in China, which have to be shipped over and contain toxic chemicals and can't be recycled. They're going in landfill once they've broken after 10 or 15 years. That's the solar. But what about this on the front page of the Telegraph, a paper that you've written for regularly, Benedict? Miliband isolated as EU prepares to abandon a ban on new petrol cars. This while our government brought the schedule forward, didn't they, to axe the sale of petrol and diesels by 2030.
It did, and it was incredibly foolish. And the rest of the world is waking up to the nonsense of how net zero by 2050 or whatever it is can be achieved. It can't. And I mean, to your listener who called in or texted in rather about the solar farm, listen, resist it. Resist it all that you can. My part of the world, from Norfolk, they've built new solar farms. They are a blight on the landscape, and people are continuing to fight the building of new ones, but they are already there in some cases. And as you say, these things are very toxic. They're not particularly clean in the grand scheme of things. And I think it's just incredibly sad that as France yesterday had a moment in time where the wholesale price of electricity fell to zero because they have rolled out nuclear technology across the nation, we are still messing about with solar farms and, of course, with wind farms as well. It's a tragedy.